Good evening, Brennan, and welcome along to the Lodge Hope of Karachi Lockdown Lecture Series. This is meeting number 93. It's a great pleasure as ever to welcome you along. I do start with an apology, Brennan, on behalf of our speaker, Brother Ian McIntosh, one of our regular speakers on all things Jacobean and military, and Angus in Forfarshire Way, but he's having broadband challenges this evening, and unfortunately he's had to pull out just about 6 o'clock this evening. So I've pulled one of the spare ones out of the bag for you this evening, Brian, which I will present to you just after I've went through our normal guidelines. Brian, as ever, can I remind you of the Grand Lodge of Scotland guidelines in terms of Zoom meetings? Please keep your video running, and a name that I recognise in the screen. If you do have broadband issues, Brian, just please drop a little message in the chat to me. That'd be very much appreciated. Can I also ask you to sign the tile on our Facebook pages? That would also be very much appreciated, Brian. Brian, we've got 2 weeks to go until what was proposed to be the last lockdown lecture, but the feedback from the poll that I did online and from the various announcements that we're hearing from our political masters, it's probably my intention to go week by week into January with speakers. Again, we don't want to compete with Lodge's meeting. However, if we're still going to be in some sort of controlled lockdown or whatever happens over the next few weeks, I would rather that we're here to provide a space for people to come along, enjoy their masonry, listen to normally interesting speakers, and help you all make that daily advancement. So the best place to find out what's happening will be on our Facebook pages. So Brian, let me take you on a little journey and introduce you to this man. Can you, Nobby, can you see that? Yeah. Nobby, can everybody see that? Yeah, hear me?
Yeah, I can see it, Gordon.
Perfect. Okay. Well, Brian, let me introduce you to Admiral of the Fleet, John Rushworth Jellicoe, the first Earl Jellicoe. Alfred Noyes said about him, "Not unto us," cried Drake, "not unto us, but unto him who made the sea belongs our England now. Pray God that heart and mind and soul we prove worthy among the nations of this hour." So Admiral of the Fleet, John Rushworth Jellicoe, he was a British Royal Naval Admiral who commanded the Grand Fleet at the Battle of Jutland in the First World War. He served as the first Sea Lord, and he was a professional head of the Navy. He became Viscount Jellicoe, and he was the Governor General of New Zealand in the 1920s. And he was also a Freemason, Brian, and it's really when he goes to New Zealand that his story of Masonry becomes very interesting. A little bit about his family life. He was born the son of John Henry Jellicoe, who was a captain in the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company, and his mother was Lucy Henrietta Keel. He was born on the 5th of September 1859, and he was educated at Fieldhouse School in Rottingdean on the south coast. He was married at the Holy Trinity Church that you can see there, Brian, in Sloane Street. And he was married to Florence Gwendoline Kayser. She was the daughter of the shipping magnate, Sir Charles Kayser. And it was actually his brother, the Reverend Friedrich Jellicoe, that conducted their marriage ceremony. They had a son and 4 daughters, Gwendoline, Myrtle, Nora, Prudence and George. His son George Jellicoe, who became the second Earl Jellicoe, he also had an illustrious military career, and he commanded the Special Boat Service, the SBS, one of our Special Forces units in the Second World War, and he went on to become a long-serving parliamentarian, being a member of the House of Lords for 68 years. His father-in-law, is quite an interesting character as well. He was born in the Limehouse area of London. At the age of 15, he took up a position as a clerk in a commercial shipping route to Japan, and subsequently he set up his own shipping line, and he founded Kaiser and Company in Liverpool in 1877. For those of you, Bern, who are interested in military connections, Charles Kaiser, 1st Baronet, was appointed honorary colonel of the Glasgow-based 1st Lanarkshire Artillery Volunteers in 1898. Kaiser was a Freemason. He was an officer in the United Grand Lodge of England, and he founded the Wilbraham Masonic Lodge, number 1713, in the province of West Lancashire, and you can see their crest there. That lodge went from strength to strength for many years. However, it did fall off the roll of the Grand Lodge of England in December 2008. The Wilburn Lodge was named after the first Earl of Latham, and he was initiated into the Apollo Lodge in number 357. He was also an honorary colonel of a volunteer rifle regiment, the 1st Preston Lancashire Rifle Volunteer Corps, and he went on to become the Provincial Grand Master of West Lancashire. He then had further promotion, and he became the Pro Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England. The other family connection that I thought was of interest, and we're still doing some Masonic research on him, is Admiral Patton. He was a second Sea Lord, like Jellicoe, and he was the second Sea Lord at the time of the Battle of Trafalgar, and he was Jellicoe's great-grandfather. This chap, Patton, was born in Fife and Enster, educated at Kirkcaldy Grammar School, just like the previous Prime Minister Gordon Brown. And I've been speaking to the chaps at St Isle, number 95. They've just recently published their history, and they're looking into their records to find out if Patton was actually a Freemason through in the Snook. So when we look at, come back to Jellicoe himself, Bern, he had a variety of nicknames, and at each stage through the presentation, you'll see one of his nicknames, one of them, Hellfire Jack. His early career, he started as a midshipman in the training ship HMS Britannia in 1872. He went on to Newcastle in 1874, and then he transferred to the ironclad HMS Agincourt in the Mediterranean Fleet in July 1877. Bern, there's no truth in the rumour that the Agincourt was Nobby's first ship as well. Early promotion for him, he was promoted to sub-lieutenant and he joined HMS Alexandria. Another promotion to lieutenant, and he returned to Agincourt in 1881. He then became commanded a rifle company of the Naval Brigade at Ismailia during the Egyptian War of 1882, and you can see the Marines there under gun in action. At about that time, he came across another famous brother Lord Kitchener. We've already heard from Grant MacLeod during the lockdown lecture series about Lord Kitchener, so I don't propose to go into him just now, Brian. But to me, it's really interesting that two of our nation's greatest military leaders, both Freemasons, were together in that early fighting in Africa. Kitchener, as we know, was initiated into La Concordia Lodge in Cairo in 1883, and he had quite a keen and active Masonic history, and you can see a couple of the jewels that have his name and caricature on. Coming back to Jellicoe in his early career, he qualified as a gunnery officer. He joined the turret ship Monarch as a gunnery officer, and it was during that service he was awarded a medal from the Board of Trade, the Silver Medal, for rescuing the crew of a capsized steamer near Gibraltar in May 1886. He then joined the HMS Colossus and was put in charge of the experimental department, the early research and development of the Navy, and he then made his name really within research in the gunnery. Further promotion to commander. He went to the Sansparel in the Mediterranean Fleet, and then he transferred to the battleship HMS Victoria. That was a flagship of the Commander-in-Chief of the Med Fleet, Vice Admiral Sir George Tryon, and we'll come back to him. And he was aboard that ship when it collided with the HMS Camperdown, when it was wrecked off Tripoli on the 22nd of June 1893. And again, Camperdown's a Masonic connection name for those of us up in Forfarshire. Promoted to captain, 1897. He was sent to the staff of Vice Admiral Sir Edward Seymour during the Seymour expedition to relieve the legations at Peking during the Boxer Rebellion. And Bernie was really badly wounded during the Battle of Baikhan, and he was told he would die. They thought that his wounds were that bad, but he confounded the doctor and he confounded the chaplain by living and coming home. This is when he got some serious promotion. He became naval assistant to the 3rd Naval Lord and Controller of the Navy in 1902, and given command of the armoured cruiser HMS Drake on the North American and West Indies station in August 1903, and you can see a picture of the Drake there. As a protege of Admiral John Fisher, another famous naval name, he became Director of Naval Ordnance. And remember, Brian, he was a gunnery officer. Made aide-de-camp to the King in March 1906 and promoted Rear Admiral in 1907. And this is all before the Great War, Brian. He went on to become the 3rd Sea Lord, and he became Commander-in-Chief of the Atlantic Fleet in December 1910, hoisting his flag on the battleship HMS Prince of Wales. Brian, you can see the new Prince of Wales, HMS Prince of Wales, that took its name from that earlier one, and that was at his naming ceremony at Rosyth. Confirmed Vice Admiral in 1911, and he went on to become second in command of the Home Fleet, hoisting his flag on the battleship Hercules in 1911. Further promotion continued, and then he became second Sea Lord in December 1912. So as we move to the Great War, Brian, the Admiralty was in the control of a brother you will have heard of, Winston Churchill, and he removed Callaghan as Commander-in-Chief of the Home Fleet in August 14. Jellicoe was promoted to Full Admiral and assigned command of the renamed Grand Fleet in Callaghan's place. However, he was appalled by the treatment of his predecessor. He just didn't think it was right, the way that Churchill treated him. And the relationship between Churchill and Jellicoe simmered away in the background over the next few years. Fisher and Churchill both had to leave office in May 1915 because they were quarrelling over the Dardanelles and Gallipoli and everything that happened there, Brian. And it's an interesting quote here from a letter that Jellicoe wrote to Fisher. "We owe you a debt of gratitude for having saved the Navy from a continuance in office of Mr. Churchill. And I hope that never again will any politician be allowed to usurp the functions that he took upon himself to exercise." And you can see Fisher there and a young Churchill. So when you think about what Churchill did for our nation in the Second World War, what people thought about him 20 odd years before. Many of you, Brian, may have been on the Jellicoe Express. It runs past my house up to Perth here, and it was the longest railway route in the UK, 717 miles from way down here all the way up to the north of Scotland to Thurso to take the sailors up to Scapa Flow where the fleet were. So the Battle of Jutland, Brian, we know that it's one of the major naval battle of the First War. And it was fought between the British Grand Fleet and Germany's High Seas Fleet between the 31st of May and the 1st of June. different people say different things about the ships and the men involved, but I've went with the 250 ships and 100,000 men, and it is reputed to be the only major naval engagement of that war. The protagonists on either side was Jellicoe and Beatty, and there was Scheer and von Hipper on the German side. Jellicoe commanded the British Grand Fleet, and you can see the photograph there, Bern, from July 18, 1914. And I was listening to BFBS radio today, and the Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Radican, was talking about how that the Royal Navy today is really not fit for purpose in the amount of ships that we need for all the different things. And I don't think we'll ever see a Royal Navy of the size that this photograph depicts. But when we look at the reputation he made in the Battle of Jutland, still a lot of controversy over him. Some historians characterise him as too cautious, others faulting him, and faulting Beatty for tactical errors. I don't think unless you were in the heat of the battle, you just do what you do at the time. But one of the things that we do know, and one of the things that the Germans said, had the Allies lost that battle, the First World War would have been changed totally. The Allies' blockade maintained before and after the battle was strategically critical. It greatly impacted on the German war effort, restricting Germany's naval movements and domestic and war supplies. And Allied command of the sea was part of the reason the Germans resorted to raiding and unrestricted submarine operations, just as they would later in the Second War as well. But lacking command of the sea was part of the reason Germany lost both wars. And Jutland was a hugely critical event in Germany's defeat. When we come back to Churchill, and he's talking about Jellicoe, Churchill stated, Jellicoe was the only man on either side who could lose the war in an afternoon. And as I just said there, Brian, if he'd lost that battle, it might have been totally different. We know Churchill was good at the memorable sayings, and this is just one of them, Brian. But it's interesting that they're both brothers sitting across the table debating. If you want more information about the Battle of Jutland, Brian, and Freemasons, the Masonic Great War Project tells us there was at least 67 confirmed British brethren who lost their lives at Jutland. And no doubt there was many more on the German side as well. Talking about the German side and Freemasons, one of the protagonists was the Count Felix von Luckner. He was known as the Sea Devil. He had the reputation for successfully waging war without casualties, which really made him a hero and a legend on both sides. In the Great Battle of Jutland, Luckner commanded a gun turret on the Crown Prince with great skill and cunning, it is written. And on the 12th of May after the war, Luckner became a Freemason in the lodges of Golden and Kugel, the Große Landeslodge in Deutschland in Hamburg. And if you remember, Bern, from one of our previous speakers, there was around 9 different Grand Lodges in Germany at around that time. But when the Nazis took control, Hitler made life for von Luckner very difficult and challenging. His bank account was frozen. He was living in the remote German city of Halle at the time. And the Count was asked by the mayor of that city and others to help them in April 1945 to contact the approaching American troops and seek terms. The German general in command of the area disclaimed any responsibility but permitted von Luckner to try. The control officer from Berlin remarked disdainfully, "There's another international Freemason," because he'd been listening to the propaganda coming out of Hitler and his team about Freemasonry. But von Luckner did manage to find and negotiate with the Americans, among whom were Masonic friends, and they agreed not to bomb the city. When Hitler heard that, he condemned them to death. Von Luckner went into hiding. Hitler, as we know, allegedly died, and Luckner died in 1966. The other Freemason of note, Bern, is Alfred Peter Friedrich von Tirpitz. and you'll have heard of the battleship Tirpitz. He was the German Grand Admiral. He was Secretary of State of the German Imperial Navy, and he's the man who's credited with making the German Navy a power. Tirpitz was a member of Lodge Fichten Herzen Frankfurt, and you can see the crest of that lodge. So going back to John Rushmore Jellicoe, or another one of his nicknames, Al Jelly. One of the postcards there, you can see, hats off to the flag we all love and adore, and give it mighty great cheer. For with gallant commanders like this to the fore, old England has nothing to fear. It's amazing now that we're Scots and we're talking about that, and the old England comes up quite regularly. So after that, after the Battle of Jutland, Jellicoe was appointed the first Sea Lord in 1916. The first Sea Lord, the rank is a really ancient rank, can be traced back to Jean de Beauchamp, Beauchamp, first Baron Beauchamp de Warwick. He was appointed Admiral of the King's Southern, Northern and Western fleets on the 18th of July 1360. And that was the first time anyone was given the appointment of the whole English Navy as it was at that time. Lloyd George comes into the Jellicoe story because he basically sacked him. He tried to sack him earlier because he had alleged that Jellicoe had failed to act on secret but absolutely reliable information about a German attack on a Norwegian convoy. But Lloyd George ultimately got his way because on Christmas Eve 1917, Geddes, who was the First Lord of the Admiralty at the time, was instructed to sack him, and he received a letter from Geddes demanding his resignation. The letter stated that he was still in the building and available to talk, but Jellicoe went and spoke to his one of his colleagues and one of the admirals that he looked up to, Admiral Halsey, and he wrote that Jellicoe should do what was best for the service. However, the move became public 2 days later, and Jellicoe was lauded by the public for his actions. But who was Halsey? Halsey, again, a compadre of Jellicoe's, 1916, was promoted to Commodore as captain of the fleet to Admiral Jellicoe in HMS Iron Duke. Iron Duke took its name from Arthur, Duke of Wellington, who was a Freemason in the Irish Constitution. Halsey was initiated into the Lodge of St. John and Paul. He became a joining member of the Navy Lodge, and we'll talk more about the Navy Lodge in a minute. And Halsey's Masonic career rapidly advanced after the war, pretty much because he was pushed out of the Admiralty. But Masonically, he went on to have a stellar career, ultimately being appointed Provincial Grand Master of Hertfordshire. His whole family were involved. Thomas Friedrich Halsey was Grand Master of Hertfordshire as well. Mr. Friedrich was that from 1873 to 1924. Halsey, the son, the one we're talking about, became Provincial Grand Master, and his brother, the Reverend Canon Friedrich Halsey, became Provincial Grand Master. So 3 from the same family. The other connection, coming back to Scotland, who took over from Jellicoe was Rosalind Weems, 1st Baron Wester Weems. He was the youngest son of James Hay Erskine, and he was raised at the ancestral home of the Weems at Weems Castle on the Fife Coast, and that's just about 5 miles from where I'm sitting as the crow flies. Rosalind Weems was the successor to Jellicoe, and he wasn't a Freemason. But interestingly, when we look at remembrance, it was Weems who made the decision, much to the anger of Lloyd George, which I think was a good thing at the time, potentially, because he'd upset his good friend Jellicoe, that it was he that made the decision to have the ceasefire come into effect at 11 AM. Lloyd George wanted it to take place at 2:30 so that he could make the announcement in the House of Commons and make him look good. But Weems realised that 11 AM on the 11th day of the 11th month had a much more stronger and poetic quality about it. And ultimately, besides, if they waited another 3.5 hours, more soldiers would have been unnecessarily killed. And that, Brown, is why we meet at the 11th hour on the 11th day. But he did come from a Masonic family. His brother Randolph Gordon Erskine Weems joined the Lodge of the Oswald Dunnikier Lodge on the 24th of September 1888. But by 1890, after a meeting in his district of West Weems, he decided that a lodge be set up in the district. And on the 7th of August, it was chartered by the Grand Lodge of Scotland, and it was given the name number 777 and became Lodge Weems. And he became the first master of that lodge. And you can see their first meeting at Weems Castle, and there's some of them there. And Brenna, I was lucky enough to be honoured a couple of years ago as an honorary member of that lodge. But within the province of Fife and Kinross, there were other Bren wanting to set up other lodges. And another couple of miles down the coast from the Weems, in the small fishing village of Buckhaven or Buckhind, the Bren there sought patronage from Randolph Gordon Erskine Weems of Weems, and the lodge was named Randolph after him, and that took the name 776. So you had 776 and 777, both associated with Weems. And their father, James Hay Erskine Weems, was the master of the Lodge of Kirkcaldy, 72 in 1853. You can see him there. So that was a lovely connection for me back to Jellicoe and the role of Admiral of the fleet. So Jackie O, one of the men of the moment. Promoted Admiral of the fleet. He was sent down around the world because he'd fallen out with the politicians, and they sent him to the furthest reaches of the Empire. They sent him down to New Zealand. And he became very friendly with the Governor General of New Zealand, and he admired them. He became Governor General, but he admired the people down there for their staunchly loyal attitude to the Empire. Lord Liverpool was going to be the governor, but that fell through, and he became Governor General in September 1920. Out of interest, Brian, the New Zealand national anthem, God Defend New Zealand, was written by Freemason Thomas Bracken, who you can see down here in the corner. When you look at the Governor Generals of New Zealand, there's been a few of them. They continue to this day, but we've had 6 of them have been Freemasons: the Lord Plunkett, the Lord Newell, Charles Bathurst, Viscount Bledsloe, the Viscount Galway, the Lord Porritt, and Sir Charles Ferguson. So, including our one, 7 of them. William Massey was the Prime Minister of New Zealand when he was down there, and Jellicoe and Massey became really strong friends. They discussed imperial affairs, they talked about naval policy, which he probably shouldn't have done because as Governor General, his job was not to interfere in domestic policies. But through the relationship, he joined Freemasonry. He joined Freemasonry in 1922. Massey was installed as Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New Zealand in November 1924. Earl Jellicoe being his immediate past Grand Master. So 24, 22, Brian, think of those dates. Jellicoe was raised to become a peer of the realm in 1918. So Brother John Rushmore Jellicoe, or Silent Jack, initiated on the 23rd of February 1922 in the renowned lodge by Worshipful Brother Massey, Prime Minister. Passed in Civic Lodge, Christchurch, and raised to the degree of a Master Mason in Ara Lodge, Auckland. 3 degrees, 3 different lodges in different areas of New Zealand. He became a charter member and was installed into the lodge of Island Bay Lodge on July the 7th, 1922. February, July, entered apprentice to Right Worshipful Master. July to November, Right Worshipful Master to Right Worshipful Grand Master. Now, that's promotion for you, Brian. And he was installed into that lodge by an old jock, Thomas Ross, who was a very respected member of the old Scottish Constitution. So 9 months from initiation, Brian, that has to be a record. Jellicoe attended in his capacity as Grand Master, acted as consecrating lodge officer of the lodge, the Jellicoe Lodge, that was named after him. You can see where it met at Renown there, Bern. And in 1924, he was called back to the UK. So he only had 2 years really in New Zealand enjoying his Freemasonry. But when there's the gratitude that his Masonic Brethren felt towards him can be seen in this newspaper clipping. I won't read it all, Brethren, but it did say Freemasonry was increased by leaps and bounds, especially in the Dominions, but there's still much more to be done. He regretted with all sincerity that the time had come for him to say goodbye, for that would be the last big meeting of Masons he would attend in New Zealand. He hoped that Freemasonry would continue to flourish and the craft lived up to his high ideals. During his term as Grand Master, he constituted 35 lodges under the Grand Lodge of New Zealand. And in 26, on his return to England, he was appointed the Grand Representative. On his return, he joined Navy Lodge, and his ballot to become a joining member was on the 4th of December 1925, and you can see that from the billet Admiral of the Fleet, Jellicoe. Navy Lodge, Bern, is a lecture in itself. I won't go into that this evening for time, but I would encourage you to look into it. The Navy Lodge. There's a lovely history written, but it was the inspiration from Admiral Albert Hastings Markham. Markham, strict, austere, forbidding disciplining of the Victorian mould. Again, a famous naval man. Navy Lodge, they pride themselves on being the premier naval lodge in the world with an unparalleled history. Encompasses 4 monarchs, Dukes of Kent, His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh when he was alive, 3 winners of the Victoria Cross, and more admirals, generals, vice admirals and senior officers than nobody cares to admit that he's met over the years. In 1927, he was awarded past rank of past senior Grand Warden by the United Grand Lodge of England, and you can see that there in the 1930 English UGLE Masonic Yearbook. Another nickname of him was the Little Admiral. Where I got an interest from him, Brian, he took over from Brother Field Marshal Haig as our president in 1928, and you can see him there with Haig and Lady Haig at the Lady Haig Poppy Factory. But he was also president of the Royal British Legion down south. He was actively involved in the Boy Scouts, and like Bob Roberts, actively involved in the National Rifle Association. If you want to see a memorial to Jellicoe, there's many of them all around. Draycote Place, where he lived in London, Trafalgar Square, he's one of the busts on the Isle of Wight. There's a plaque to him in one of the churches, and in Auckland, and this picture's flipped round, so I need to change that to Brian. But if you're ever in Auckland, you'll find that plaque to him. So Brian, fair winds and following seas. On the 20th of November 1935, Brother Earl Jellicoe was called to the Grand Lodge above. And in 1936, in making reference to his passing, the Most Worshipful the Grand Master, Brother J.G. Essen of the Grand Lodge of New Zealand said, The death of such a man is an event which makes ordinary expressions of regard seem cold and conventional. Nevertheless, we sincerely mourn the loss of one who we admired and revered. With perhaps the single exception of Nelson, no British admiral ever played so great a part in the service of king and country, and certainly none ever carried such tremendous responsibility. That's the procession to his funeral at St. Paul's. That prayer is the order of service. And if you visit St. Paul's, you can visit his tomb in the crypt. Brian, so many people to thank for this presentation. They're all there, but in particular, Captain David Swain, who's the Grand Secretary of the Metropolitan Grand Lodge and the author of the history of the Navy Lodge. Brother Damien of Lodge Devotion, Grand Lodge Victoria, and Bernie Richmond from Wellington for their researches on Jellicoe as a Freemason down south, and the various other people from Weems, Randolph, Thomas Harper Lodge, and my workplaces that have given me the knowledge and inspiration and the knowledge to pull this presentation to present it to you. But Brian, if you do find time and you've got an eBay account, I would recommend any one of these 4 books about him. So Brian, with that, I will stop sharing and say thank you for listening. And we went from 36 to 41. So,
Brethren, I think you'll agree with me that tonight, Brother Gordon has again stepped out of the shadows and presented such an excellent presentation on Admiral Jellicoe, Brother Admiral Jellicoe. And I think it's only fitting that we give him a round of applause for that. I think there's a few questions, Gordon. I'm just going to zoom down. Oh, there's a comment from John Belton. It was, I think, Halsey's daughter-in-law who sought recognition for the Lady Masons in 1919 from memory, but it was refused. Just a curious aside to the Halsey mention. Brother Roman says a hospital in Buckhaven is Randolph Weems Memorial Hospital.
it is that.
And that's the only comments I've got. You're stunned them into silence, Master.
Yeah, that's good. Then, I think for John Belton, the Lady Dorothy Haig, she was a Lady Freemason. And I've been speaking to the secretary of the Order of Women Freemason that she was a part of, and she was a member of one of their travelling lodges back in the day. But their records of her are still in lockdown because they've not went back since the pandemic. So I'm hoping to get a lot more information about her in 22 to add to the researches I've done on Haig and Jellicoe. So, well, Nobby, thank you for that. And Brian, thank you so much for listening to me this evening. It's always very much unwanted, I think, to hear me because that means our guest speaker hasn't turned up. But hopefully I've not let any of you down, and I've given you a little bit of a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. Next
Gordon,
week,
you let nobody down.
well, thank you, Alan.
Stepping in the number of times you have stepped in to keep this running, nobody could thank you enough, Gordon.
I was going to say the check would be in the post to you, but you've
a little look forward for you. My Auntie Doreen gave me 2 books. One of them goes through the newspaper history of the First into the Second World War, where there's an awful lot of what you've discussed and presented to us presented. And the other book that covers the same sort of period is a book called From Log to Luxury Liner. There were popular books at the time to put on one's bookshelf, but they were absolutely packed full of wonderful photographs of the people at the time. And when we finally get to the point where we can meet again, I'll bring them up and I'll lend them to you for a bit to have a thumb through.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alan. That's very much appreciated.
Master, that presentation there was absolutely riveting from start to finish. Absolutely fantastic and well researched. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Gordon. You did a brilliant job.
No, certainly. support that. It was marvellous. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. We've got a wee comment from Archie in here as well. I think it's just. If my computer doesn't do it. Or,
Right. I'll read it out for you, Master. Thanks, Gordon. Very interesting talk. Much appreciated. I hope all have an enjoyable time over the festive season and a safe and healthy 2022. Take care, everyone.
yeah, and Archie, the same to you and yours. And I think those sentiments go from everyone here at the Lodge Hope of Karachi to you all that are with us this evening. Next week, I hope to persuade Ian of the Virgin Engineers of Worked Their Magic to come along and speak to you all. And the following week will be the week in between Christmas and New Year, Brian, and we will be having a brother come to us from New Zealand to speak to us. So he's going to be getting up very late or very early, because I think they're about 10, 11 hours in front of us. And brother Molnar, I think it is coming to speak to us then. And then it will be week by week. So Brian, thank you so much. If you're not here next week, have a great Christmas, and we'll see you the following week. But for those who can be here, hopefully we'll have brother Ian McIntosh. Brian, please feel free to unmute and say good evening to each other.
Thanks once again for that, Gordon. It was really most enjoyable, and as somebody said, riveting. You're quite
Thanks,
easy to
George.
listen to.
Thank you, George. Appreciate it.
Well done,
Yes,
Gordon.
enjoyed that.
Well done,
Enjoyed that, Gordon. Well done. Yeah.
Very much, Gordon. Well done.
Yeah, well done. I enjoyed that as well. I've had trouble with the technology here, as you can see.
That's fine, Ian. You're here anyway.
Thank you, Gordon. Thoroughly enjoyed that, and thanks for standing in.
Thanks.
Another good one, Gordon. Always a pleasure to listen to.
Sure. And I'll give you 5, Brian.
Okay, guys.
you.
Good night.
Thank
See you
you
next week, guys.
Thank you once again, Master, for standing in.
Gordon.
Thank you very much.
Excellent, mate.
Brilliant.
Lecture. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Cheers.
Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
all.
Good night, everybody.
Brian.
Thanks, Gordon.
And 3, Brian.
Good night, brethren. Stay safe out there, and have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all if I don't catch up with you.
And 2, Brian.
And you, Tony, as well.
Good night, everybody.
And one,
And
Brian.
just to let you know,
Hey,
Gordon,
everyone.
just before you all go, just to let you know, the Royal Navy has got some new ships underway. They're being built in Rosyth as we speak. So hopefully we may see a grand fleet again.
Well, who knows? But, and thank you,
Well
Brian.
done, Gordon. Very interesting.